The 2024-25 season conference schedule is out. We're going to break it all down on 94 feet of UNC.
Gordy to Black. The time, 18. Shot, Jordan! Michael Jordan!
Swicker with the defense and the rebound. That's a good effort by Swicker.
Stackout streaking in on Park. Rebound stuck is good, and he gets fouled by Park. Oh my goodness, what a dunk by Stackout.
I think that he's running back so quickly, but you know what? They're down east. It's fair to say, but you can't teach that. You can't teach that. You can't teach that high-rising ability.
3. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
Great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you could.
The glass no good. Rebound followed by hands. No good. Carolina.
Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key.
Alex, about this over. Carolina. The Tar Heels have won the national championship.
And that is it. There is a new dean in college basketball. North Carolina takes the title.
Hampton, any final. North Carolina is the 2009 national champion.
And this year, the confetti is going to fall to North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time.
What's up, everybody? It is Friday, September 27th. You are tuned in to the 94 Feet of UNC podcast. I am your host, Lindsay Graham. Of course, I got a special guest in the building with me today. He's not an unfamiliar face. As you all know, my guy Jonathan is back from Point to the Passer podcast. He's with me today. We're going to chop up a few things or whatever. But before we get into things, please make sure you like and subscribe to my YouTube channel at 94 Feet of UNC. Hit that notification bell so that you don't miss out on any content. Because once again, as I tell you all on every episode, you never know who's going to stop in at the Zell Dome. A lot of people, they like to come back. I mean, it's a comfortable place for everybody. So hit that subscribe button, man, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss out on any content. Also, follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at 94 Feet of UNC. You reply, you hit me up, I reply back. You know, it's one of them things. Like, I like to interact with all my fans. Also, 94 Feet of UNC podcast merchandise is coming soon. So once again, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Instagram so that you don't miss out on free giveaways, contests, all those types of things that I got prepared and coming for you guys here soon. My guest in the building today, of course, he's back. Jonathan Adams, excuse me. Let me make sure I get that right. From Point to the Passer podcast. Jonathan, how are you? Welcome back to the Zell Dome, my guy. What's going on?
I'm good, Lindsay. It's good to see you. Excited to be back. I feel like a lot has happened in the few days since we talked the last time, whether it's more recruiting news, whether it's the schedules coming out like you were talking about. But really excited to be back here. Such a short turnaround. It's almost the same as Carolina having to play at Pitt and then play at Duke and turn around and play Pitt right after that. It's kind of what it reminds me of in terms of the first things I thought of with the schedule. But yeah, I'm doing well. Hope you are, and then excited to get into some more things today.
Absolutely, man. You know, it's always great to be able to chop it up, you know, and talk UNC basketball and everything or whatever. So, you know, I appreciate you coming back. Like I tell everybody, it's an open invitation. And as everybody, as you can see, Jonathan, he takes advantage of it. And that's what's up. Like, I appreciate that. He's comfortable coming to the Zell Dome. Like, you know, he comes in, he takes his shoes off, he gets comfortable. You know, Jonathan, you know, of course, if you want something to drink, I got you, my guy. I got you for sure. You know what I'm saying? So I got to show that great hospitality, man. You know how it is, man, for sure. So listen, this is another one of those off the top of the dome type podcast. So we don't really have any specific topics, but we're gonna jump into some things. Like Jonathan said, there's a lot of stuff that has happened since he was last on the show. and we gonna jump right into everything, man. So, Jonathan, what's up, man? What's going on? What's on your mind?
Oh man, I mean, there's so many things. Like, so it being Friday the 27th, I guess the first thing is that today is Derek Dixon's birthday, but it's also his commitment day. He's wanted to commit on his birthday. So later today at 3:00, he's committing, and that's really the biggest news on my mind. We're looking for that first commit for Carolina for the 25 cycle, and hoping it's going to be Derek Dixon later today. That would be a great way to start the class. So that's really piece number one, I think, in terms of what I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
The second piece is the schedule, and I had a lot of first impressions, thoughts about the schedule when it came out earlier in the week. So happy to talk about that, and along with, we're just getting so close to the season too, and there's still so many questions, so many things that are exciting, I think, about this team that we're going to figure out and find out about. So the anticipation is building in terms of I think we're all just ready for the ball to be tipped at this point, right? Especially with practice just starting. And I guess the last piece with that is practice starts earlier in the week, Monday, and we get that great video from the social media team with Carolina basketball. I think you had said on social media something to the extent of, if that doesn't inspire you, I don't know what does. I was ready to run through a wall after that video with Sean May and Jawad and Hubert. I mean, I feel like Hubert, each season, he gives us a different soundbite that you can just run with, right? It was live action at first, that first season. He's had last year, the one that stuck with me was a we, not me mentality.
Yeah.
This year it's state of emergency. Like, if that doesn't sum up how urgent you need to be and intense you need to be and just take the opportunity that you have with this team, I don't know what does. That's the last. So I got multiple things on my mind, but those are the things that stand out at the moment.
Well, I mean, hey, that's what coming to the Zell Dome is all about, man. You got a lot of things on your mind, so I mean, I'm always down to talk for sure. The door is always open, so I mean, let's just jump right into the first thing that's on your mind. You mentioned Derek Dixon, committing today, 3:00. I truly believe. Well, I'm sure a lot of people knows that the crystal ball, as people say, is right now leaning towards Carolina's way. So I mean, how you feel about it, man? What do you think?
I feel really good. I always feel a little bit hesitant to feel 100% great until the commitment happens. That's just how recruiting is, and I'd like to have the official answer, see the player put the hat on, all those things, make the announcement. But I feel really good. I think we should feel like we're in a good spot, both in terms of the likelihood that he selects Carolina and Derek Dixon as a player. I think it would be a great addition to next year's team, as somebody who projects as a 3, probably 4-year even player, and somebody that really seems to align with his game and how he could develop with past guards that we've had that have stayed 3 to 4 years and have really enjoyed great jumps in their game and ended up being even star players at the guard position. So excited to see how that goes for him. Before I get ahead of myself, that hope that it is Carolina today, and if it is, he's got a lot of potential. I think he would be a great addition.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm like you, a lot of potential. One of those players that's going to probably stick around for a few years, which is a great thing, because a lot of the times nowadays you don't really get that out of players like that. They normally stay maybe 1, maybe 2, and then they're off to other things or whatever. But I see him. I see him a 3, possibly a 4-year guy, depending on how he develops, for sure. It's I think getting him is going to kind of get the ball rolling with other recruits. We've mentioned a lot of other recruits on the last show, and right now it looked like the is swinging towards, a couple of other players that we mentioned that we talked about, and I feel strongly about that we also end up landing. So, and it's just, it's funny because even with him committing today, we also have a special guest on campus this weekend as well, with Isaiah Dennis, a native, North Carolina native. So it's going to be interesting to see what that does, and with his, see how he feels about UNC and things like that. So but let me ask you, out of the recruits, 'cause there's still a few of them out there, how many do you think we land?
I'm going to go with 3. Like I feel very strongly we're going to land 3. Uh, I'm still not 100% that AJ will be a Tar Heel. Just because I think that's going to be a very highly contested recruitment all the way to the end.
Right.
But if AJ comes to Carolina, then I think you probably end up taking 4. But in terms of the ones that I feel strongly about, would be Dixon. I'll feel even strongly after today, one way or the other. So Dixon, and then Denis is probably the one that I feel strongly about in the backcourt. I do think it's going to be Denis or Mullins between the two.
Right.
Yeah. Now, they could take both, but if we're going off of what Hubert Davis has done in the past, typically his staff has taken, they'll take one of 2 players and whoever commits first. And we saw this in the portal cycle this last year too, with Van Allen Lubin versus Coleman Hawkins and Ugo Onyenso. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. I will say, since we talked last, that now we know that Mullins, he hasn't set a date, but he is going to commit sometime in October, probably late October.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Although that he hasn't set a date, so he might move that up depending on what's happening. Because I think there's pressure on those 2 guys depending on where they're at. If they really want to be at Carolina, and that's their top school, we could even see a push up in terms of a commitment date if you're only going to take one of the 2.
Right.
Denis is set for November 2nd. So right now, Mullins would be first. My preference would be for Mullins. I think he's a starter day one. He, both in terms of a shooter, but also he does multiple things really well offensively. And then I like his toughness. I like the edge that he plays with. Not in the same way as a Cormac Ryan, but he has that sort of that edge and toughness. And Ingram brought that toughness too, right? So I think he's that type of player that you need on your squad. And he's the type of player that Hubert Davis, that's a perfect fit for Hubert in terms of the way that he likes to play. So that would be my preference. Denis is a great player too, though. He reminds me a lot of past Carolina guards in terms of he can excel in transition, and he can also really shoot it. And he can hit some contested, tough shots as well. So either of those guys will be great players at the next level. Denis, it's probably going to take a little bit more time. He's not maybe as polished or ready day one as Mullins, but he's somebody, again, that he potentially has that next level athleticism and game that he could be, a 3-year guy potentially. And he's got great size too at 6'5", both of them. So that's kind of where so in terms of just summing that up, I would say Dixon and Denis, I'd say I'm most confident about. Mullins, UConn's still in the picture, and it seems like that even if they get their next prospect, who would likely be the next domino for them, in Darius Adams at the same position, that they're still interested in taking both him and Mullins. So we'll see on that. I still think that Nick Kamania is probably the other one that's most likely, or I feel most confident about, just in terms of the visit that he had the same weekend that Dixon visited.
Right.
And his recruitment's been kind of quiet since then, but I don't think that's a bad thing. So we don't have a date for him yet, but I still feel really good about him, even though he's on the West Coast and he has strong interest from UCLA and Gonzaga as well. Those would be the 3. And then AJ is kind of the wild card for me. But I think, if it was me getting like my ultimate wish for the class, it would be Dixon, Mullins, Kamania, and AJ.
I like that. And I'm with you on the four that you have. If I had to sub a player out, um, and this is no shade to him or anything, but I would sub Aminia out with Bundalo. Um, just because of what Nico could do in the paint, being 6'10", 6'11", something like that.
Makes sense.
Of course, his visit is coming up next week with the Caden Lewis, so that's gonna be interesting to see how everything transpires and plays out. I guess you could say. I do feel good about Dixon. Um, I like Dennis. I really do, and like you said, I think he's a more development type player a little bit, even though he does have a game. He
Mhm.
can make tough shots. He has a really nice jumper. Um, Very athletic. 6'5". I mean, he's got all the right tools. Um, but like you said, Mullins just a little bit more polished. Um, and I mean, I definitely would like to have Mullins. I'm still standing on what I said about AJ. I think AJ is a lock for UNC. Um, I think Mullins is a lock for UNC. That's just me though. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
That's not from any sources or anything like that I've heard or whatever the case may be. But it's like when me and you we talk behind the scenes. You know, you got to read the room and look at the tea leaf. And Carolina didn't make Mullins top 3 for no reason. Like,
Right.
there's been all of this talk about, Indiana, about UConn. And I just think, you know, I think that picking up some players for like from UConn and Indiana, as far as like Jalen Harrelson, he went to Notre Dame. Um, I thought he was going to Indiana, and of course, if he would have went to Indiana, I think that would have altered Mullins' decision a little bit because they do both play the same position. Like you said, Darius Adams with UConn, if they pick him up, that could also alter Mullins' decision. And I just think when Mullins came for his visit, you know, just when reading what some of the insiders have said about him, that he was just in complete awe about UNC. Like he said, he walked into the building, he seen the floors that we have on the walls, basically from the national championship games. In St. Louis, in Michigan, and all of that. Like when he was just walking past it, he was just in complete awe about all of that. Like it's like Carolina blew his mind, and I think that is one of the main reasons why Carolina made his top 3 list. Um, and then just looking at some other things that have kind of happened with like Trent Sicily, really trying to push to get Braylon to come to Indiana. If I'm looking at something like that, if Trent Sicily is really trying to push him to come to Indiana, which they've played with each other since they were like little. So
Right.
if that was going to be the case, then I think Sicily has kind of ran out of that push to get Braylon to come where he's at. I think he's already reached his max when it comes to that, I guess you could say. Um,
Mhm.
and I just think that, that's kind of like one of those signs to where it's like you pushing him hard to come to Carolina. I mean, to come to Indiana, which to me, if I'm reading the tea leaves, then that's kind of like, it's not. He's not thinking Indiana like that. Like UConn or Carolina is probably could be before Indiana because Sicily is like pushing him so hard to come to Indiana, and I think he already has his mind made up as far as where he wants to go. Um, if I'm not mistaken, was Carolina his visit before UConn? I know it was Indiana was his visit after Carolina.
It was so North Carolina was after UConn, and then Indiana was this last week, right?
Right.
And Sicily committed, basically committed on the visit or announced right after.
With Mullins there. Let's not forget that. Yeah.
I mean, I think you're right in the sense that it feels like all of his visits are done now. He canceled the rest of the visits that he had scheduled.
Mm-hmm.
He's really just waiting to make a decision and then announce the decision.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm with you on Indiana. If it was going to be Indiana, why hasn't it happened yet? Now, granted, it could be a situation where, like, maybe he needs something more from them, and there could be a back and forth happening. There could be some other things where he just has to think it over. But I feel like it's between two. And I earlier in the week or last week when we talked, I probably would have said Indiana and UNC.
Mm-hmm.
But it does feel like UConn's also a really good fit for him in terms of his mentality. I don't think he's Cam Spencer. That's kind of been the comparison from a UConn perspective in terms of his tenacity and the way that he plays. I don't think he's quite the same way. But Hurley is somebody who could get the most out of somebody like that, and he'd be perfect in his system. But he's also perfect for Hubert Davis, too. A shooting guard like that who can play on both ends, it can really excel in Hubert Davis' system. We've already seen that. So I'm not quite there in terms of saying Carolina, but I will agree that they're definitely a player in the recruitment. There's a reason why he canceled the visits that he had left.
Yeah.
Immediately after this happened, right? And so he's clearly set on, okay, here are the three. But Carolina's definitely a player in this. And I think they may have surprised him a little bit. And he had said all along that he wanted to see these schools in person. He actually wanted to be on campus. He set a lot of visits. I remember Sherrell McMillan talking about it earlier before the visit started, that he wanted to see all these schools, or 10 visits or something like that, and just how ambitious that was and how likely it might be that he actually would get to that number just in terms of logistics. And it turns out he doesn't. But for the ones that he's invested in the most, he did that for a reason. I think it had a real impact on him, like you're saying. So I think Carolina's in a good position. I just wouldn't go – I'm not there yet to say that he's going to be at Carolina. But I think it's also a sign that he's committing when he is, if Denis sticks with where he's committing. And so I don't know. It's very interesting if they're only taking one of those two in terms of how this is all going to play out. But again, would love to have either of them. I just think that Braylon is more of the ready from day one. You're going to need somebody with, obviously he's not going to replace RJ. You can't expect that from a freshman coming in, but we need somebody in that shooting guard spot. And there's an opportunity for playing time there from day one.
Yeah. And I'm going to be, I'll tell you this. I'm a firm believer of the remembrance of your last visit. I'm a firm believer in that. And yes, Indiana was his last visit. But once again, if I'm looking at the tea leaves, why didn't he commit then when someone he's played with for so long committed while he was there on campus with him, along with Eric Ryby? Why didn't you commit then? So to me, Carolina is his last remembrance, because he visited Indiana, but if Indiana was it, he would have committed, and that was his last visit. But Carolina was right before Indiana, and I just think, like you said, it blew his mind when he got to UNC, and I think that really sticks out in his head. And I just think that, like you said, UConn, if anything, I think Indiana is his third option. I think it could be between Carolina and UConn. But once again, I give the edge to Carolina just because that was his last visit that he really remembers, because UConn was before Carolina. You see,
Sure.
you know what I'm saying? So, and like people say, a lot of people were surprised that Carolina made his top 3. Like, a lot of people had, they thought it was Kentucky.
Right.
They thought it was going to be, Indiana, Kentucky, and UConn. Um, they thought that it would have been Duke, but he canceled his visit to Duke. So for Carolina to make his 3, it says a lot. And to be honest, if it was me, I would feel good about Braylon Mullins being a Tar Heel. That's just me. From the way that, and if I'm not mistaken, I think he did schedule a date. I thought it was like October, the end of October or something like that. I
haven't
thought I
seen
seen that. I might have been wrong, but
he said I think he originally said late October, early November. Now he's saying it'll be in October. So this was from Stock Risers, that they have active on social media. I think they have a website too, but they've been getting interviews directly with Braylon and his dad. So when he cut his list, he said late October, but he hasn't actually set a day,
an actual date.
So it really, and I think that's interesting too. So to me, it says he's not decided yet, but he's in that final phase, right, of his process, and it could. I think it could happen even a little bit earlier than not, right? I could see it happening in mid-October if he feels good about his decision. It's really going to come down to that. But I think I think you're right. I think and that's something that, for granted, the landscape has changed now, where you have more. I feel like more prospects are canceling visits if they have a long list. They get through it and they say, okay, I've seen the schools that I want to. Because it used to be, if you got the last visit, that meant a lot. You had the last shot, and where a player put you mattered. Yeah. And so anyway, I think you're right. I think the recency there helps, but I also think playing time is a big factor for Braylon specifically. And it's not a guarantee that Sola Ball at UConn and Aiden Mahaney and even Liam McNeely to some degree, it's not a guarantee that those guys aren't there next year. I think McNeely is probably most likely to be gone. Yeah. But then you add in Adams. So their situation could be more crowded than ours if you assume that Ian Jackson is on to the next level, and Mullins could be that number 1 at the shooting guard spot. And if you have Elliott and Trimble come back, that's kind of your 3 in the backcourt who are going to play a lot. So I think there's a lot of value in that. But I agree with Indiana. I feel like if that was the choice, it's making me wonder why it hasn't happened. Yeah. Again, there could be some other things behind the scenes that they're waiting on. So that one will be really interesting. I don't think it's settled yet, but it's not going to be long, obviously, based on his timeline.
I think it's Indiana for the optics, just because he's an Indiana kid, and it's one of them things like, why wouldn't I have my home state on my list? Kind of like with Jasper. Jasper had 5, but 2 of them was in his state, Louisville and Kentucky. He's from Kentucky. So it's kind of like, it's for the optic. Like, there's a possibility I could stay home. But I really love this place down in North Carolina. Like, that it blew my mind, like you said earlier. It blew my mind when I got to the campus. And like I said, it's a reason why Carolina made that top 3. And I didn't think about, Mahaney, Ball, and them guys up at UConn. And then if they pick up Adams, that's a loaded backcourt already. So where's Mullins gonna, in a way, kind of fit in? So, and that's just me speculating. From what I know, some people take what I say at face value. I don't know, but if I feel good about it with Braylon, the same way that I feel good about AJ. I'm trying to get my man Jonathan on board with me. I'm trying to get him on board with me. I'm working, everybody. I'm working, but he ain't there yet. He ain't there yet. But
I'll say this, Lenzo, you've at least shifted the conversation for me from, because when he initially announced the list, I looked at the list and I was like, there's no way that Kansas, no one was talking about Kansas, no one was talking about Carolina. So for me, it was very much like the optics of having two blue bloods on this list with some of his top schools that we had heard about. So that's very much shifted from, I was very skeptical that Carolina was even involved, because we've seen that sometimes, right? We've seen, okay, I'm going to have the big brand and include them on the list, but maybe I'm not serious. Maybe I want to drive up the NIL by doing that. Right. What my offer is going to be, but Carolina's clearly in the mix here. They're clearly a factor, and it's just more about the rest of the process playing out. He goes to Alabama this weekend. If football matters, then he's going to be a heck of a football game between Georgia and Alabama. But I don't think that it does. Ultimately, he and his family seem very focused on his brand and his game and his future, and that's what's most important. So he's got Alabama, he's got Baylor, and then he ends with BYU. He's in Utah at Utah Prep in Hurricane, Utah. Being the nerd that I am, I looked up how far that is from BYU. It's about 3 hours, so he's not far away from BYU. Right. So I just need to see the process play out. Having said that, I love the positivity, and I like going with what you're saying, which is, hey, might as well just like keep being positive. Let's manifest it, right? To the extent that we can. Either way, the positive vibes, the shift in the vibes, I think, from the fan base related to recruiting were significant between the time that you and I talked the last time and the time that we're talking now. There's a lot of positive conversation around Carolina in the recruiting space, really for the first time in a long time, right? Prior to the portal cycle last year. So that seems like it's significant. I'm excited to see how it all plays out as the dominoes start to fall, even today with Dixon being that first domino.
Yeah. And I'm going to be, I'll say this. I think out of the 7 teams that Dybantsa has left on his list, if he cut it down to 3, I can see the 3 schools of where he could possibly go. I don't think he's an Alabama type player. Nate Oates is a defensive type guy. He relies on that, I guess you could say. Baylor just don't seem right, like a right fit for him. Kansas State, I think he only went there because he was in Kansas and the father said that he likes Wu-Tang. I don't know. I don't understand that. I can see BYU because of it. It's the optic. Once again, he's out there in Utah, so it's like go somewhere else or stay home, basically. So I can see BYU for the optic. I don't know about Kansas like that. But we've seen things happen and things change. Kansas being an Adidas school, he's a Nike guy, so we see that. Who did I leave off? The only one the only 2, like I said, is either Auburn or UNC. I don't know. I can see him being an Auburn guy, but my thing is if you're not going to Alabama, then why would you go to Auburn? Like, if anything, I would go to Alabama before I go to Auburn, but I wouldn't be coached. I'd rather be coached under Bruce Pearl than to be coached under Nate Oates. I'm just not a Nate Oates guy. So that's the reason. Yeah, that's the reason why I narrowed that list down. And I'm like, he moves like a Carolina guy. He really does. And like I said, I could be wrong, but don't nobody hold me to that. But at the same time, I just look at a lot of different things. Yeah.
Well, it's like you're saying, you're reading the tea leaves, you're kind of getting a sense of what's going on and then how you feel about it. So it's and recruiting is fluid, right? So it's not a certainty of what's going to happen. It's more what you're feeling right now, but it's based on observing some things, hearing from multiple insiders, right? But also, and that's kind of the unique space that you and I both with our podcast have, is we can kind of aggregate some of the different sites and insiders and what they're saying, in addition to reading the different, like you're saying, how is he moving through the process of the recruitment? What are some of the tells and signs related to that? So I think all that stuff matters. I could see, I mean, if it's 3, I don't know if it's Alabama or Auburn, but I think one of the 2 is on the list. If I had to choose, I would say Auburn, and then BYU and Carolina. So I would put them in serious contention at this point, based on what I've seen even the last week and since the visit. Yeah. I think Alabama and Auburn are interesting in recruiting, always, just because I think that Bruce Pearl and Nate Oates, frankly, were mechanics in a past life. They're a little greasy. Right? Like, they're doing things potentially. Well, not potentially. That's been documented with Pearl in terms of things that have happened in the past. But so there's that part of it. Back to the Kansas State thing real quick. This is a reference from like what feels forever ago, but so he did make the comment about Wu-Tang, liking Wu-Tang his dad did. It made me think of the Chappelle skit, Wu-Tang Financial. Do you remember that? So like they've got Jerome Tang, but they also have the money behind him too. So so I don't think I wouldn't put them in the top 3, but I also wouldn't say that they're out of it either. I really feel like, honestly, I feel like maybe Kansas is the one that, if I had to rule one team out at this point, I think every other team feels like a player. Baylor doesn't really fit as much for me. But the other ones, I could see reasons for each. Anyway, all that to say that it's something we're going to continue to be thinking about, continue talking about, because he is such a huge target and has huge potential at the next level, both for the college team that he goes to for a year, but really for what it does for their brand and his game too, going forward.
Right. Exactly. So, and just to throw this out there about Kansas, as you've always said, you never count out Bill Self.
That's true.
Right. But at the same time, Bill Self is so aggressive that I don't think he would have let AJ leave without committing. And I just don't. That's the reason why I don't lean towards Kansas like that. And the only reason,
they've been really, really silent, right? There hasn't been a lot of buzz around Kansas, and that could be what it is, which is there's not buzz in his recruitment, and they're not really a player at this point, even though they are one of his 7. Yeah. Or it could be, I love that, even though it was brief, the Showtime Winning Time show, right, with the Showtime Lakers and the Jerry Buss quote of being a swan and paddling under the surface. Yeah. So I don't rule that out with Bill Self either, that there's activity happening, but behind the scenes we're not hearing about. But yeah, if I had to say final 3 right now, or top 3, it would be Auburn, BYU, and Carolina, not necessarily in that order.
Right. Yeah. So we agree. So we got that far. We got that far. I got you. We was close. We progress. It's progress, Jonathan. You know what I'm saying? Like we every time, just a little bit. If I can get you just a little bit, okay, yeah, you make sense with that one. All right, so let me X them off. Then you know, little by little. I'm working on it. But it's progress. We doing good.
That's exactly. I would have said, before we talked, I would have said that Carolina was in the top 7.
See, look at that. See, with the effects of me, I guess you could say the effects of me. It is what it is. I love it.
Shifted my thoughts on it, man. I think about it differently.
Hey, and look at the Braylon Mullins situation. Like, Carolina won. It's tough between UConn. I just think Carolina is the lock for him. Period. But we've already discussed it. But like I said, I forgot about Mahaney and Ball, and then McNeely, and then if they get Adams, I forgot all about that. So that pushes them out for me. That
Well,
you just gave me
honestly,
even more confidence as far as like, yeah, he's gonna pick Carolina.
yeah. And I mean, there's so much in flux too, right? Because we don't know who's coming back at Carolina either. You could have guys who we aren't expecting. Like, what if Ian Jackson does come back? Then that's a whole different conversation in terms of what playing time looks like.
Yeah.
So it'll be really interesting. These next couple of weeks, I think, are going to be really interesting because we'll, at least by mid-October, we should have an idea, potentially even where Braylon is going.
Yeah.
But if not, we should have an idea of when his visit date is. So
Yeah.
we'll have a much better, clearer picture of who those first two commits are going to be if we assume that one of Denis and Braylon would be a commit and the other one wouldn't. And then you kind of go from there with the rest of the class. So even from when we talked last time, I mean, it's feeling a lot more real. The planes are starting to circle, aren't they? It's the final descent
Hey,
for a lot of these recruiters.
They flying around RDU, man. They flying around RDU for sure. They just circling, like you said. They just circling or whatever. So I tell you, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna throw out a hypothetical lineup for next season.
Okay.
But I don't respond to it. I just want you to meditate on it and think about it. All right. Because we're gonna move to the schedule here. So a hypothetical lineup for next season. Elliot Cadeau at 1, Braylon Mullins at 2, Ian Jackson at 3, AJ Dybantsa at 4, and Jalen Washington at 5. Don't respond. Just meditate on it. Meditate on it. We're gonna move on let's move on to the schedule. Let's move on to the schedule. That's a great lineup. Oh my God.
I'll just say I had one word that came to mind. I'll let folks guess what it was, just reacting to that lineup. One word that came to mind. It is a very good lineup.
It's a great lineup, bro. Oh my God, that's a great lineup. So, but we'll talk about it later. So I know you brought up the schedule. So what all sticks out to you on this schedule? I'm sitting here looking at it now. So what sticks out to you on this? What do you like? What do you don't like?
I mean, the first one is very personal to just me and how I see things, and I have a one-sided beef with Jason Capel, meaning that Jason Capel doesn't know me. Right? and so anytime the Capels come up and we play Pitt, and it's been well documented, right? His views on Carolina, how he was not appreciated the way that he felt he should be while he was at UNC. And as a result, he approaches that game like it's the biggest game on the schedule. And Jeff Capel doesn't really have to have a reason to go with him on that just because he went to Duke. So the way they approach UNC is like it's one of their top rivals. It's always a tough game. Also, just the style of play. So the fact that we have to go at Pitt and then turn around that Saturday and go to Cameron for obviously the game at Duke is always hyped. Yeah. The final Coach K game at Cameron was its own thing. In terms of just a game outside of the K retirement tour, it was the Zion shoe game, right? It was probably the one with the most hype. I think this game at Cameron, because that game usually has more hype than the game at the Smith Center. And a lot of times the first game anyway, the first Duke Carolina game does. So the fact that it's the first game and it's Cooper Flag, the hype is going to be off the charts. And that's going to be a draining game regardless of how it goes.
Yeah.
So that those three stood out to me. You have at Pitt, at Duke. Thankfully, you get a week until you have to play Pitt at home. So at least you don't have to travel, but playing them twice, and especially having to play them right after playing Duke, that's a tough spot. Yeah. So my thought to myself was that Jason Capel was probably smiling when he saw that schedule, because last year when we played Duke in the first game, we lose to Georgia Tech the game before in Atlanta, and then we turn around and lose to Clemson at home. And I'm not saying that's going to happen. It doesn't happen every year, but it is just tough. The game before Duke and the game after Duke is always tough just because of how much that game means.
Yeah.
So that stood out to me. Zooming out a little bit more bigger picture, that stretch where you have 4 out of 5 games on the road in that period of time through mid to late January into mid-February. And those are places that we have historically just either struggled with, or those are tough teams. You add in at Clemson, at Syracuse to that mix. That stretch in the middle of the season, I feel like, is the hardest stretch on our schedule in the conference slate. So I think we'll learn a lot about the team during that stretch. You add at Wake Forest into that mix too a little bit earlier, which we've really struggled at Wake lately. Hubert actually hasn't won a game at Wake yet. He's 0-2 in Winston-Salem so far, and it hasn't even been close, right? We got blown out in both of those games. So that it's really that meat of the schedule in the middle. I feel like the fact we're at home at the end of the schedule helps us. And a lot of our home games are, I would say, now we don't know. It always changes once you get into the year, but at least from what we're seeing or what I'm seeing going into it, the home schedule seems easier than the road schedule. So the fact that we have the home games at the end, it should be a nice ramp up, ideally into the tournament.
Yeah.
Those are a few things that came to mind right away. It'll be a tough schedule, though. I don't think it's going to be, for folks who are saying, the ACC is down. I think the ACC is going to be better, specifically in the middle and at the bottom of the league. And for that reason, there aren't really going to be that many nights off like last year, where you could, really last 2 years, where if you're playing Louisville, you kind of have a bye. That's not going to happen anymore. And so as a result, I think it's going to be a tough stretch to really prepare us for the tournament runs.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, just sitting here looking at the schedule, because you just broke it down a lot deeper than I thought of. But the first part of the season is a little tough as well.
Tricky
because of course, Georgia Tech, that's early in December, so and that's at home. But then
it's right after Alabama, though.
So you got 2 games at home.
Which to me, the Alabama game is going to be tough. So I think that's just interesting. I think it could be one of those games that we have to be ready. I would be worried about coming out flat against Georgia Tech a little bit in that game.
I think we blow Alabama out. I'm gonna be honest with you. In the Smith Center too. In the Smith Center too. I think we do. Because to be honest with you, I don't think nobody really predicted us to do what we did last year versus Tennessee. And Tennessee was a better preseason ranked team than we was. And they came into Chapel Hill and just got a mud hole stuck in them, like, for sure. Like, so I think the same thing happens with Alabama. Now, granted, it may be a little bit more test, but I think Carolina's going to be too fired up for Alabama. I think there's a lot of I think there's a gripe towards Nate Oates, of course. I think there's a lot of bitterness. I think the guys that played last year are going to instill that in the other players that didn't play in it. And I think it's going to be I just think that it's going to be crucial, because to me, if you ask me, Alabama could possibly, they're pretty decent team. I wouldn't say that Alabama, I think they're a little overrated, honestly. Now, of course, you got Mark Sears, you got Grant Nelson. To me, those are probably your top scorers. Big Cliff, he's not an offensive guy. He's defense. So, of course, if you focus on defense, you get him in foul trouble, something like that. Of course, that favors Carolina. But at the same time, Cliff's going to have to come out and guard Jalen, because if Jalen is out popping that 3, Cliff's got to come out of the paint. So, which gives room for RJ, Ian. You put Drake Powell out there. You can put Drake Powell on Grant Nelson. Like, he might be a few inches shorter, but
he is, yeah.
We're very defensive. We're very strong on defense, and I just think that we're going to be pumped up for that. But looking at this at the beginning of the schedule, man, you don't know what Louisville is going to be. Notre Dame is always a sneaky team. Always. I'm not concerned about SMU. Then we go to NC State, another sneaky team because you don't know what they're going to be.
And it's a rivalry.
And yeah, so
yeah.
they're going to be pumped up for that game because the first game is at State. So they're going to be pumped up.
I don't know what their plans are, but I could totally see them unveiling the ACC championship banner before that game. You know what I mean? Just to rub it in and say,
yeah.
But you're right. The energy in that building, it's going to be a sellout. It's going to be packed at least for the first half. We've seen how that goes if it doesn't go State's way in the second. But I felt the same way about that because remember last year we started very similar where we had the stretch of at Pitt, at Clemson, at NC State to start conference play in the new year. Yep. So the fact that we have 3 out of 4 on the road, I didn't love seeing that. I do think it's better to catch Louisville at the beginning of the season and frankly Notre Dame as well because Louisville has so many new pieces. And I like Pat Kelsey a lot. He's a really good coach.
Yeah.
Their tagline that he brought in is revival. And I do think they have come back from the depths in terms of just where the program is and some of the players they brought in. Kason Pryor from South Florida he's got a huge motor. I mean, he plays super hard. He's tough. He's like 6'10", 6'11", very athletic, can run the floor, can shoot it. Yeah. So the combination between him and Terrence Edwards, who's the Sun Belt Player of the Year at JMU last year, they got some tough guys on that team. And I think, anybody has a point to prove when they're coming to the Smith Center. And those guys would be coming to the Smith Center for the first time since they weren't with Louisville. They weren't in the ACC last year. So that one, or not the Smith Center, would be at Louisville. So I think that's a tough game and a tough place to play anyway. I think that'll be a fun one. And then at Notre Dame, I agree. They're always sneaky. They're tough on the road. We struggle sometimes at Purcell Pavilion anyway. On top of the fact that Marcus Burton's now a sophomore, right? So you have Marcus Burton, you have Braden Shrewsbury, Micah Shrewsbury's son, who he's kind of like a glue guy for them. He brings a lot to the table on top of the fact that this is year 2 in Shrewsbury's system. And he showed last year. They were obviously not very good for most of the year, but you could see them getting better. And they started winning games late. Yeah. I think that they're a dangerous team this year. I don't think they'll make the tournament, but they're going to be a little bit like Georgia Tech was last year, right? Where on any given night they can beat anybody.
Beat anybody.
Yep. So I do think that's a tough game. And then State, like you said, SMU is an interesting team too. I don't know enough about all of their complementary pieces up and down the roster, but Boopy Miller, who was at Wake Forest, who's a dynamic guard, right, is at SMU now, and he can put up some points, and he remembers what happened last year when we played Wake Forest, so he may have a point to prove. And then I'm just going to call him Big Samet because I can't pronounce his last name yet. From Turkey, 7 foot plus, big guy he's a freshman, but he's not a freshman, Lenzel. He's 21. This guy is a grown man. I know Riley Davis really wanted Samet, and he was one of the international bigs that Carolina had at least put feelers out to at one point. So that'll be interesting because I put him on the short list of players that will be tougher in terms of the bigs that we'll face and the physicality that he can bring in the paint. So that opening stretch I don't think is easy. I think we should handle it well because we need to, because then that middle of the season really is when it gets really tough. With that 4 out of 5 on the road is really, really rough.
Yeah. And I'm gonna throw it out here. I do think we beat Wake Forest this year in Winston. The reason why I say that is because we don't have to travel to the West or the Midwest this year with Stanford and Cal. You got both of them in Chapel Hill back to back, and then you go to Wake Forest. So you don't have to worry about and that's after Stanford is 3 days later at Wake Forest. So you don't have to worry about jet lag or anything like that, traveling from the West Coast, trying to get adapted back to East Coast time. You don't have to worry about that. But then, like you said, after Boston College, the schedule is brutal. I mean, great. It's a great schedule, but it is brutal. At Pitt, at Duke, home against Pitt, and like you said, Clemson and Syracuse at both of those. Then you got NC State at home. Virginia, I don't really pose them as a threat like that, even though, of course, you never know. Thank goodness we don't have to go to Charlottesville this year because
that's why. Yeah,
we
that game
never play well. Yeah,
exactly.
we never play well in
as
Charlottesville. But then at Florida State, you don't know what Florida State is going to be. And then you got Miami at home. We don't know what Miami is going to be. Virginia Tech, I'm not really concerned about. And then you got Duke at home. So, but at the same time, we never really play well at Virginia Tech either.
We don't.
And this game is at Virginia Tech. Like
we really
back
don't.
end of the back end of the schedule is just banana. But I'm confident enough that the Tar Heels will still prevail. Period. Regardless of what adversities that they may face, whatever the case may be. And of course, I still think they're going to be right in the top 3 for sure in the ACC this year. But
I'd say the same thing. I think having looked at the schedule now and diving into the teams a little bit more, I think if it was today, I'd say I'd still probably put Duke number 1 and Carolina number 2, and then I'd have Wake actually number 3. I think this is
me too.
This is the year that Forbes breaks through.
Yeah.
But there's still questions. They got to prove they can win on the road.
Right.
They could not win on the road to save their lives last year. And it cost them. They were a tournament level team, and they really just shot themselves in the foot down the stretch there.
Yeah.
But this year, I think they get it done. I think he's brought in some good pieces around Hunter Salas. Salas, I think, is a I wouldn't even say sneaky ACC Player of the Year pick. I think he's right on the list with RJ and a few others. You put Flag potentially up there too. And then the combination of guys that they bring back Efton Reed in year 2. Both the fact that Salas and Efton Reed are in the program for a second year is big. Forbes hasn't really had his star guard come back, right? He had Alondis Williams for a year, and then he had Appleby for a year as well, the transfer from Florida. So having him back is big, and then the pieces they have around those guys, they're dangerous. That's a very good team. It's a very good team.
I got them at 3, like you said, right behind Carolina and Duke. I got Louisville at 4.
Oh wow!
Well, actually, you know what? I take that back. I actually got Clemson at 4.
Yeah. I think I did.
Yeah, and then I put Louisville at 5, and then NC State would probably be 6. But once again, tough game. I'm not really worried about Syracuse this year. I think we're gonna beat the fool out of Syracuse because of what they did last year. And Syracuse don't really have a lot going on like that. I think what's my guy's name? Audrey.
Red Autry. Yeah.
Yeah. I think he's in another rebuilding process because they lost so much. They lost Judah Mintz. They lost Quadir Copeland. They lost Malik Brown. But you got JJ Starling back. But then what do you have around him? Like,
that's really the question. He's a really good coach, but that is the question. And I think the fact, add in Benny Williams, who left the team in the middle of the year last year.
Right.
Who's their big guy going to be? I know it's Eddie Lampkin, so they got the transfer from Colorado. He's huge. He's a big guy, 6'11", 265. So not quite as big as taller, not as big as DJ Burns, but like he's DJ Burns' size, basically, right? So I think that's an interesting matchup in the sense of you have somebody that big who can push, in theory, our bigs around. Maybe that's a Ty Claude game. Maybe that's a game that Ty Claude plays some more minutes defensively, right? Because he physically he can really bang in the post with somebody like that. He doesn't have the same height, obviously, but I think that would be interesting. On the same token, Lampkin doesn't have the mobility to stay with Jalen Washington. If you can bring him out, like you were saying before, with Big Cliff against Alabama, you can use that advantage you have on the other end, right? In terms of somebody who can shoot it from outside at the 5 position. I'm with you. I don't think Syracuse has has enough around Starling, and I haven't seen enough from Starling to say that he's ready to take that next step. He's not efficient enough from what I've seen, although he did have some good stretches last year. So I think we're okay there. Clemson's going to be tough. Ian Shefflin is a load, and but I think we have the guys this year that maybe we can defend him a little better. But he's difficult to contain, and but they also lost a lot, right? I don't know that they're going to be the same without PJ Hall or Joe Girard. So yeah, I know this isn't like
but they picked up Zachary.
They did. So
College.
Yeah, so you
Chase
pair
Hunter.
him with and I think Zachary was 40% or above from 3 last year. So you're right, exactly. You pair him with Chase Hunter and Chase's brother. They have a pretty good backcourt there, and then you have Victor Locken, who transferred in from Cincinnati, who's a big in the post, who gives them more physicality. Chauncey Wiggins should be back too. So they've got some guys, and Brownell's figured it out. It feels like, right? He felt like he was on the hot seat forever, year after year.
It does feel like that. Yeah.
He's built the momentum now with this Elite 8 run as the peak of what he's done at Clemson. I think I would say at least going into the season, I'd have them 4th based on what they've done before and who they brought in.
Yeah. I'm with you on that. Clemson, I think we still prevail. Wake Forest, I think we do still prevail, but very tough games. Like I said, with Florida State, you never know what Leonard Hamilton has up his sleeve. We never play well in Tallahassee.
Yeah,
there's a few places we just don't play well at. And I mean, the record has shown that. It feels like up until now, it felt like we played at Virginia every year just because of the fact we couldn't beat Virginia at home. It just feels that way. So, now we finally get to see Virginia come to Chapel Hill. Finally, whatever. But I think that's because of the fact that we did beat them at home last year. I'm starting to figure out this system, man, as far as like how they do this system as far as the schedule and and all of that and stuff. But that's another show or whatever, because I would have to deep dive into that, because I think of course it depends on wins, losses, who did you lose to, where did you lose the season before. So but we beat Clemson, but then Clemson turned around and beat us at home.
Right.
So it's like, and because of the fact Clemson went a little further, if I'm not mistaken, didn't they go further than us last year in the tournament?
Yeah, so we would have played them if we beat Alabama.
Right. So we beat Clemson at home. Clemson beats us at home. Clemson goes further than us in the tournament. That gives them the edge, and that's the reason why we have to go back to Clemson. Syracuse beat us at home. Well, no. Syracuse beat us in Syracuse. We blew them out in Chapel Hill. But the last game was in Syracuse. They blew us out. Okay, well, you got to face that again. So we're going to send you to Syracuse. Like, we beat Notre Dame at home, but we only played Notre Dame once. So it's only right we go to Notre Dame this year. Like, it just the way that I figured it out, man. I think I figured it out how they set up that system, man, to do the schedule.
I think they try as much as they can. They try to alternate it if you don't have the home and home. So they'll flip, but it's so complicated now with this many teams, and you have the West Coast teams and their travel schedule they're trying to figure out. I think the bigger thing with the ACC schedule for me is it's like anything else with sports or a lot of things. It's made for TV. So when you're Carolina, you're going to play your toughest games when interest in basketball, college basketball ramps up. You get past the Super Bowl in February, all of a sudden you have all these made for TV kind of primetime games in conference popping up. That's not a mistake. And we see that every year. I think it was more in the middle of the schedule than we've typically seen it.
Yeah.
But last year was backloaded, and there's no accident with the way that's done. And I don't fault that, because it is ultimately an entertainment product in addition to everything else that college sports are.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what we might have to do? We might have to do this, Jay. Like, what do you let's on the off season for next year before the schedule comes out. Let's do like a little contest or something. Put a contest together, see who, not between us, but like
Right.
maybe get the fans involved, see who comes closest to what the schedule might look like when they come out.
I like it.
No dates or times, but who's going where and who's playing where and stuff like that. Maybe we should do something like that. We'll talk about it though. We'll talk about
I think that could be fun to try to predict it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So real quick, because I know you got to run and everything. So because we keep saying that we're gonna get to it, and here it is. We still haven't gotten to it yet. Let's talk about this year's team, the expectations, your X Factor players, because I haven't forgotten about that. I might have forgotten who it was, but I haven't forgotten about the X Factor conversation. So let's jump into it, man. What you got? What are your expectations? Well, first, who's your X Factor?
Yeah, so X Factor, I'll stick with Jalen Washington. So that's one thing that hasn't changed since last week. So I'm going with Jalen Washington. The way I'm defining X Factor, and I haven't gotten big into AI yet, but I actually did use AI for this definition. I liked it. I like what AI came up with, which was a couple components for an X Factor. One being unpredictability. So there is some unknowns in terms of what this player will bring. A combination of high potential, but maybe they haven't had the experience or opportunity to this point, or haven't had the outcomes and results yet for whatever reason. And then there's also a good amount of variability between what the floor for their performance could be and the ceiling too. And part of that is they have some unique talents and skills that maybe nobody else on the roster has.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are questions, maybe some limitations as well. So I think Jalen Washington actually fits that really well for this team, in part because while we don't need one of our big men, specifically our five, to be that guy, the dude on this team,
right?
It's a very important position. You got to have somebody who, I think, to go where this team wants to go, which ultimately is to win a national championship, you need to have somebody who is not just serviceable. You need to have somebody who's above average on that in the five position. And Jalen, we've seen the potential offensively, right? I mean, it's jaw-dropping in terms of some of the things he can do, but his minutes have been so low. He only played about 8 minutes a game, I think it was last year, and had maybe 3 games where he went above 15 minutes. We just haven't seen him enough to really know what to expect. I will say in the games that he has, actually, it's only been 3 games in his career at Carolina that he's gone over 15 minutes. So it was Virginia, his freshman year when Baycott turned his ankle early in Charlottesville. Right. He flashed in the first half of that game. That was one of his best performances in that first half. Yep. Louisville, he played pretty well in that next game. And then it was Charleston last year where he played a good amount of minutes. I think it was maybe like 16, 17 minutes. He scored 17 points in that period of time against, granted, it was one of the worst teams on our schedule for last year. But the point is you've seen him flash, especially offensively. You've got the potential from 3, even though he's only shot 15 threes last year. And then the mid-range game, I think you've talked about a good amount. That face-up game, if he gets you to bite on his jab step, it's over. Like, you might as well just run down to the other side of the court. So I know that Hubert Davis is prone to hyperbole. I know that he has said that he's the best shooting big man he's seen in high school ever, which is a big thing to say. Now we actually have a chance to see how true that is, right? We haven't really had a chance to see it just because he hasn't played enough. So there's the uncertainty unknown around him. But I do think, and you look at the synergy numbers, so Sherelle McMillan and Sean Moran actually talked about this on one of IC's podcasts recently, where they talk about how his synergy offensive efficiency numbers are in the 99th percentile. That's off the charts. Again, very low volume. Defensively, he's in the 20s. That ultimately is the concern. That ultimately, to me, is not only how far he can go this season, but I think how far this team can go. Right. Because I'm not sure. I think the ceiling for the other guys defensively at the 5 position, whether it's Lubin or Claude, is not as high, right? Like I think that because of his length, because of just his size, right? If he can If he can hold up defensively, that changes the game for us. So it's really on that side of the floor. His defensive ability is an X factor, but we also haven't had a 5 who can shoot it like him, who can open it up, and it gives Hubert Davis a true range of opportunities and possibilities on offense.
Yeah.
So I think that's exciting. That's why I chose him, because if that guy reaches his ceiling, if he can be somebody who plays 25 plus minutes, and he doesn't have to have a wild stat line, but if he can give us something like 10 points and 6 or 7 rebounds, a couple of blocks, we're in really good shape.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think he's the best center that North Carolina has ever had, because of his ability to be able to step out, shoot the 3, with the jump shot that he also has. I think he does he probably should improve a little bit more on the defensive end of things. Staying out of foul trouble is
that's
very
big.
very big. It's probably the biggest, because I think if he can stay out of foul trouble, then of course you're going to get more rebounds. You'll probably end up getting more blocks, and just things like that.
Right.
I think I like Jay Wash. I really do, and I think that I think Carolina really has something special in him. But of course, like you said, being in the shadows behind Mondo for so long, and now you have the opportunity to actually be the man. Uh, I think this is a breakout season for him finally, and we're finally gonna see what he does with this. Hopefully, his full potential. Um, and I can't wait for that, because once again, he just has so many other pieces around him, like with Cade, with Lubin, um, Jay Withers, Drake, Ian, uh, RJ, Elliott. Like, he has so many weapons around him, and to me, honestly, I think this team is better than last year's team. I do believe that, because of the fact we have a unlimited number of potential. Well, not potential, but scoring ability. I guess you could say scoring body. We didn't really have a lot of that last year. I think our expectations for some players, um, not necessarily didn't live up to what we was expecting, but at the same time didn't live up to what we was expecting. Cormac, of course, he's a gunner. He's a pure shooter.
Yeah.
But Cormac was streaky a little bit last year.
Very streaky.
We expected Wojcik to come in and be that second Cormac, the one that lights it up from the 3 and everything. Like, we expected all of that last year. When you think about it, our scoring options last year, we only really had 3, and that was between RJ, Harrison, and Mondo. And of course, Elliott was his shot wasn't available, but Elliott could get to the basket at any moment. So he was like the 4th scoring option, I guess you could say. But we don't have that this year, which is a good thing, because Coach Davis, he just has so much flexibility in this roster this year, to where he could go with so many different lineups. We can play
I
fast.
completely agree. Yeah. I think too, I'm not sure if we'll be better than last year, just because the way that team came together, especially the way they defended and their toughness, to go 25-6 with the schedule that we had last year was really impressive, to be honest. And that's even with dropping a couple of games that we probably shouldn't, right? When you think about it, the ACC games that we end up losing were games that we're the better team. It wasn't like some years where we're maybe second and third in the league. So all that to say that team, what they did was special. So I do think it's going to be difficult to match that from an outcome and results standpoint. But in terms of talent, this is a more talented team. I don't think there's any question about that. When you bring in Drake Powell and Ian Jackson,
right,
already those guys are the two most talented guys, not just on this year's team, but it would have been on last year's team too. And so it does give you a different dynamic, absolutely, on offense in terms of I think we all expect this to be a really potentially prolific offensive team. And who do you guard, Linzel? Like, how do you handle if you go into the base set, like you go into Carolina's base horn set where they have two bigs up top with Elliot Cadeau. You set a screen, you can pop out either Tyson or Jay Wash for three. And that's not to mention that you also have RJ and Ian at the corners, right? What do you do there? And if Elliott's starting to hit threes, if we hope that he hits, up to the mid-30s, he's at least a threat from three. Then in that starting lineup, if that's your starting lineup, you got five guys who can shoot it. So what do you do? How do you defend that? And then multiple guys who can get their own shot at the rim, right? With Ian Jackson, I think, being the best number one at that, with Elliott right behind him at being able to get to the rim. Yeah, so I'm with you. I think it's really exciting because there are a lot of questions. And it brings me to my second X factor, which is Hubert Davis. I think is the ultimate X factor for this team as the coach. College coaches are really the stars of college basketball in a way because they're the constants of the programs. But I think we're going to get an opportunity to see Hubert do some things that he hasn't done before, which is really exciting. Because out of necessity, this is a different group, but even things that maybe this is how he wants to run things ideally if he has the roster that he wants. Now, having said that, clearly they were going after Cliff and somebody who was an elite defensive rim protector and didn't get it. But now you have the opportunity to truly play five out with Jay Wash when you have him in there. And if he can deliver and play 25-plus minutes, and that gives you all kinds of possibilities. And then defensively, it'll be really interesting to see how they scheme things up. But from Hubert, I would say, the three things in terms of X factor that I want to see or I'm interested in. Number one, how does he use the bench? And obviously, it's been very talked about, right? It's been a trend. Carolina's ranked well into the 300s the first 2 years in bench usage, cracked past 300 last year, but it wasn't like there was a lot of usage there either. Still well into the 200s. And you have somebody like Jay Wash that didn't play a ton, and then Withers, who played, he was a key rotation player at times, and other times he didn't play at all. This has to be different this year. You got to consistently play 8+ guys. Early in the season, I think you play 10. Right, you play all of those guys. Absolutely. With James Brown kind of being there for this is a development year for James Brown, but the other 10, let's see what you have and find some combinations that work. See some different things on both ends of the floor. So that's number one for me. Number two is I think they have to play differently defensively. The first couple of years under Hubert, we've seen two things in terms of turnovers. This is a very efficient team. They don't turn over the ball very often, which is really important. On the flip side, they don't cause very many turnovers either. So they were into the 300s in terms of forcing turnovers. Yeah. That can't happen this year. You got to get out in transition. You got to cause turnovers. I think we have the guys, especially the guards on the perimeter, to do it. But that just has not been something that has been part of, by design, really, how Hubert has run things defensively. So that's what I want to see. I'm not saying we're going to be like Shaka Smart and run the havoc defense where you're tracking deflections, but let's get some more steals. Let's get into some passing lanes. Let's deny the ball from getting inside early, since we don't have the level of physicality potentially to bang with some of the elite bigs in college basketball. Not that there's that many, though, on our schedule, to be honest. So that's my second piece. Oh, yeah, go ahead. No, sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I like this. This is good. It's
like my therapy, Linzel. I'm on the couch over here. I come to the Zell Dome. I had a lot of things on my mind.
Hey, listen. It's all good. That's what it's here for. That's what it's here for sure. You want a footstool? You want to prop your feet up? I mean, hey.
I got a nice ottoman here. Yeah, I just need that drink, and I'm good to go, man. But
I got you.
The last thing I was going to say is transition, right? And so this team, Adam Lucas has reported in the offseason that Hubert is continuing to find drills to encourage them to play fast, and that they're playing with a 24-second shot clock, even to the point that they dropped it to 20 seconds. And I know that Roy Williams is just smiling somewhere, seeing them try to play this fast. And that has not been the case under Hubert, really. Like, we ramped it up a little bit last year, but we were still in the 40s in terms of adjusted tempo, according to Bart Torvik. So, and slower than that, the year before, we were in the 90s. But some of Roy's best teams, the fastest, from what I can see from Torvik, which goes back to 2008, so those Ty Lawson teams, the fastest was Kobe White, was number 4 in the country. I don't think we get to number 4, but I think we can crack like close to the top 10, which would be kind of in line with a vintage Roy Williams team in terms of how fast they want to play. And with Ian Jackson, with Elliot Cadeau leading the way, and the hit-ahead passes, but his speed, and then Jackson's speed in transition, Powell, you just go down the list. So I think those are the 3 things I would say I hope to see from Hubert. And I think if he, especially defensively, can figure some things out, what I like about Hubert Davis, too, is that he will try things, and if it's not working, he will make adjustments, both in-game but also through the course of the season. And so I think we'll see some concepts on defense that he'll be trying out, trying to find something, and along with the rotations. So the beginning of the season is going to be really interesting. I'm excited to see, even when we play Memphis on the 15th of October, what does it look like? It's going to look different.
I don't know if you had all of those are like X factors for sure. I don't know if you've heard any of my past episodes, but my X factor is Jay Withers.
I had heard that, and I heard actually on Thursday's Locked On Tar Heels, Isaac Shade had Coach Robinson on, who you've had both of them on. Right. And Coach Rob talked about he knows somebody who was at practice this week that said Jalen Withers is looking really, really good. So I'm curious to hear more about that from you, but just that's the latest update.
So, like, I want Jay Withers, and if Coach Davis does this, I'll tell you why. Because Carolina could even be with everything that you said, and if Jay Withers does this, or if Coach Davis has Withers do this, Carolina could possibly be the best team in the country to me. I want Jay Withers to focus on defense, strictly defense. You're 6'9", you're the most athletic on the team. You don't have to be Leaky Black, but at 6'9", and if teams make teams fearful of driving to the basket, whatever the case may be. If teams want to drive to the basket, the first thing that should always pop in their mind, and especially if you got someone like Seth Trimble out there with you and Drake Powell, right? Who I think are probably the top 2 best defenders on the team. If Jay Withers can be that third, being the most athletic, when teams drive to the basket, make them have fear of wondering where you are. They drive to the basket, you come out of nowhere, send it to the stand. Just swap the ball, send it to the stand. If Carolina is going to play fast, that works out for Jay Withers on the offensive side of things, because now you got Ian, RJ, Elliott that can push the ball up the court and just lob everything to him. You're the most athletic. You're 6'9".
Right.
6'9".
Right.
Most athletic. But defense is key to me, because if he works on his defense, then guess who you can put him on? The number 1 player that everybody is talking about out here in the country. If you put him on him, with him being the size that he is, and being that one of those top defenders, his opponent isn't going to score that much. He's going to lock him down. So if Coach Davis, because we know Jay Withers on the offensive side, and this is no shade to him if he ever hears the show or anything like that, but when he was at Louisville, he was the 2 guard at 6'9", shooting 40-something%. He had to, because Louisville sucked. They didn't have a team, right? It's different here. It's different here at UNC. We don't need that. Now, if you can contribute it, absolutely, we'll take it. But we don't need that. Let's put you on the defensive end of things. I want you to make players have fear and have doubt of driving the ball to the basket, whether it's a pick and roll, pop out and shoot, whatever the case may be. Get that agility a lot better on with the feet and the legs, and Jay Withers could end up being the ACC Defensive Player of the Year if that's what Coach Davis should have him focus on. I think that would take Carolina to a totally different level because of the fact that now you got 3 guys that could possibly be defensive players of the year in the conference. With him, Trimble should have got it last year. And now you got Drake Powell, who to me is the best defender on the team at this point because of his height and everything. His defensive skills is amazing. But he also has some offense, which is a great thing. So with all of those weapons that we have with Powell and Jackson and Davis and Cadeau and Tyson, from what I know, Lubin can even shoot it a bit. Yeah, you got all of those on the scoring side. The defense is where is what's going to win game. Like we don't have that height in the middle like we used to.
Right.
So we got to substitute it somewhere. Put your most athletic player and tallest or whatever on a defensive role, like Leaky Black. Leaky wasn't a threat on the offense, but on defense he was solid.
Right.
It's just what it is. What it is. So if Coach Davis does that, I think that takes Carolina to a whole nother level. And just a little tidbit that I heard when talking with not when talking to him, but I listened to Isaac and Coach Pat Kilby, which salute to both of them. Shout out to both of them, man. Had both on the show. But they had a tidbit that Jalen Withers' first year, he shot 20-something%, I think. Or it could be back. His sophomore year,
he was better the first year. Yeah.
Yeah. So his first year he shot 40%. Second year he shot 20-something%. Third year he shot 40-something%. Fifth year he shot 20-something%. And or fourth year, whatever. I'm getting them all mixed up. But this is the year to where the numbers should be up.
This is the good year. Yeah.
This is the good year. So just some tea leaves. You know, that I listened to and that I heard or whatever. So that's my X factor. And I mean, I'm just excited, man. Can't wait to see what goes on this year, man, with this team.
I'm excited too. Just with Withers, I mean, I think if he can do the things that you're talking about, that really does take us to another level. Because if you look at the advanced, and numbers aren't everything, but if you look at the advanced analytics, only Withers and Washington have been above replacement level, so like above the average D1 college player defensively.
Yeah.
The other in the front court, so the other guys, whether that's Cade Tyson, Van Lubin, or Ty Claude, have been below average. Now, granted, it's more important, I think, to look at the combination of the numbers and the eye test, and then while those numbers are factoring out, and that's from Evan Miyakawa, evanmiyakawa.com, does a great job with basketball analytics. But the numbers factor out who you're playing with. But at the same time, these guys have never played together. So how does it come together, I think, is important. And, yeah, I think Withers can also slide to the 5 if he has to, right? And so that's the other thing with Withers, where if Washington's not stepping up, if he's – and it could be matchup dependent. There might be a game where he's getting pushed a little bit in the post, and you need somebody to switch on there and be a little more physical.
Yeah,
you can have Withers move down there, or move in Claude, or even Lubin. But Claude is pretty physical, so you could have those two guys down there. And you're right, you got to know where Withers is. I mean, I think we all remember that UC Riverside game where he has the weak side block that leads to the RJ Davis run out to Seth Trimble for the absolute poster. And I think that's what we want to see, right? We want to see more of that. So
Yeah.
let's manifest it, man. It's good vibes right now. Glad to hear that he's playing well in practice, and
Yeah.
I think Jalen Washington as well. I'm ready for him to have that breakout that you're talking about. So if those things start to happen, this team really does go to a different level, and then we're changing our expectations, I think, overall as a result.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's gonna be a great season. It's gonna be a great season. I don't know if I've ever been this excited for a season. And just like when I talked to Ray Sean, um, I told him, I said, listen, this is probably, I think the reason why I'm so excited is because of the fact that I'm in this space instead of just like a fan. Like I'm actually getting the chance to express all of this to fans and to different people within the university and players and
Yeah,
things like that. So I'm super excited for the season, man. Like it's going to be fun regardless of the outcome. I'm still beyond excited for this upcoming season and go Heels. It's gonna be amazing, man. It's gonna be amazing. Like I hope they do get back into transition because they're gonna need that.
they do.
They're gonna need that.
They
They
do.
they are going to run teams to death. Run them to death. That's what Roy did.
Well, and
Run
I'll tell you
teams.
what, that's
Yeah.
what Hubert wants to do. I mean, the last nugget would be that Adam Lucas on the Carolina Insider podcast talked about how that Hubert, because so defense and rebounding, right? And defensive rebounding specifically, because you have guys I think who are pretty good offensive rebounders that you're bringing in, and so I think defensive rebounding is gonna be really important. So Hubert says in practice, either we're gonna be the number one rebounding team in the country, or we're gonna be in the best shape of our lives. It's gonna be one of the two. So I mean, he's stressed the shape, so the running piece of it, yeah. And that's exactly right. That's exactly what Roy's teams did. And so I think it'll be exciting for fans who love that style of play and just have great memories of whether it was the 08, 09 teams with Ty Lawson running the show or Kendall Marshall at the point, all those guys, him as the quarterback of the offense. You just go down the list.
Yeah.
That'll be exciting. So, there's a lot of things to look forward to, a lot of questions to answer, which also makes it a lot of fun. But to your point, having started doing this before last season, it is fun. Like you have a different stake in it now, right? You have a voice in a different way. You're part of the conversation, which is really cool. So I'm excited for you to just go on this ride, man, and continue to see it grow. And we'll be watching from TV, so to speak. And occasionally we'll stop by the Zeldome to see it happen in person. But excited to see things continue to grow for you.
Got to get you and Craig on the show, man.
Yeah.
Like definitely. Like let's do a PTTP and 94 feet, joint. Let's definitely make that happen, man. Like I'm just excited. I'm excited for you guys. I'm excited for anybody that's in this space. I'm excited for the team. I'm excited for the fans. But it's just words can't describe anything. They really can't. Like I can't really get the words together to describe the emotions and everything the way that I feel. So I'm listen, big salute to all you guys, man. Salute to y'all for sure. Like it's gonna be fun for y'all, of course. I'm gonna be locked in at PTTP. Like this is what it is, and we gonna be chatting it up a lot, man. We probably gonna end up doing quite a few shows throughout the season and stuff as well too. So whether
I like the
it's
crossover idea also. I like a crossover.
yeah, I'm always down for it, man. I'm always down for it. We can do some joint podcast together and the whole nine, man. And we'll just we all if one go, all of us go. Like
Right.
that's how I look at it. So
Yeah, same.
I'm with it. Whatever we got to do, we can get together, figure some things out, put some things in place, and we can make it happen for sure. For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, I thought you was froze on me there for a second, man.
No, I'm just locked in, man. You had me going, man. I'm locked in. I'm just
All right.
like I'm literally just like wrapped up in what you're talking about because it's so true.
Yeah.
So it will be very exciting to kind of go forward and to continue to, I think, build the momentum as a fan, right? The anticipation. It's a fun time too. It's also a little bit restless. It creates, I'm restless at this time because I'm ready for it to start, but at the same time, it is fun to ramp up into it and see the different things that we're going to see and read into way too much in terms of the scrimmages and other things that we'll see. But yeah, it's a fun time for sure. I guess as we're wrapping up, one quick thing on our Twitter channel. So we do a countdown that we started doing last offseason. So we do start with 100 days to the season this year and try to do for each player number a video of the day. But I threw in an extra one today for day 39. We're only 39 days away, which is it's getting close. But Bryce Johnson scored 39 points. Talk about playing at Florida State. That was a good night at the Tucker Center. 39 points, 23 rebounds, unbelievable performance. And then Marcus Page had probably the quietest 30 points that night that you'll ever see, just because Bryce had 39.
Right.
So it's always fun just for me and for us, Craig and I, to relive those memories. We actually watched that game together, so we were talking about where we watched it and everything like that. But that's something that's going on our socials to check out. But yeah, man, just appreciate the opportunity. I'm fired up talking about it. I'm gonna have to really go meditate and refocus for the rest of my day just to do what I'm supposed to be doing. But I love the conversation. Keep going. Can't wait to see what's coming next, and can't wait for us to catch up again too.
Absolutely, for sure. I appreciate you stopping by. That's Jonathan Adams from the PTT podcast. Appreciate Jonathan stopping by for sure. We're gonna get him and Craig on the show for sure, so we could do a little joint podcast together. And we definitely it's gonna be fun, and for sure. I hear the doorbell. Know what that, Jonathan? You know what that means, right? That means somebody is at the door. Yeah, that means somebody's at the door. Oh man, I'm telling you. I mean, hey, they heard it, so but it is what it is. So I guess I need to go and answer that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, check on that.
Yeah, for sure. So we appreciate y'all stopping by. We appreciate everybody for tuning in. And until the next time, for sure, it's always a good day to be a Tar Heel.